heals. Rain and
Hey,
heal.
get that shit off. What the fuck you doing?
What, man? Healing Rain is the #1 best healing spell in the game. But what do you do when it's on cooldown? Well, you employ the power of your talents, essences, corruptions, your rotation, of course, and a lot of other amazing things you can do as a Resto Shaman in 8.3. The video will go over the basics and fundamentals of the spec, and we all know that mastering the basics is one of the first steps to take towards mastering the class, right?
Shut the fuck up, man. Just get corruption and you're good.
Dude, don't tell them that. We still want them to watch the video.
Shut the fuck up.
What? You don't like cringy humor? Well, let me point you somewhere else. On the first row, take Unleash Life. This is an instant heal that heals for a decent amount and also buffs your next direct heal by 30%. One of the main mechanics your playstyle is synergizing buffs with heals, where you keep casting empowered versions of your basic heals, and you can even stack them for massive heals per cast, which Unleash Life helps with. Undulation addresses more of a single target throughput issue that you have, which is a known weak point for shamans and can become really apparent in mythic dungeons where this talent shines. Second row, take Echo of Elements. This gives you a second charge of Riptide, Healing Stream Totem, and Lava Burst. The extra charges help with giving you more instant casts to use, since you can find yourself stuck in a spot hard casting big heals pretty often. Not to mention, Riptide activates Tidal Waves, the passive that boosts your basic heals. And having more charges means more empowered heals, like I just mentioned. The 2 charges of Healing Stream can be converted into a more powerful healing totem with another talent down the line, and Lava Burst complements your DPS output, which can become necessary if you're pushing high keys or you have healing downtime in the raid. Deluge is an alternative for keys depending on your preferences. It's a pretty straightforward buff to all major healing spells on targets affected by Riptide or Healing Rain. Third row brings about some utility. Spirit Wolf is a great survivability tool that you can use pretty much in all situations. It takes a few seconds to get all the defensive stacked and move speed as well, but the strength of it remains, and it's pretty beefy. Earth Grab Totem roots mobs in its area of effect, which can be good for fights like Skitra with the illusions, or in an ad fight or dungeon where keeping mobs locked down so you can kite is the strat. Next up, on the 4th tier, a few options again. Earth Wall Totem is a personal favorite and a much stronger defensive cooldown than it would seem. It works great when your group is stacked and everyone keeps taking trickles of constant damage for a long period of time. Both raiding and dungeons can benefit greatly from this. Alternatively, Ancestral Vigor adds an HP buff to your heals. It usually performs better in dungeons, however, there are certain affixes that scale with HP and this can cause more pain, so you have to be aware of it. Affixes such as Bursting and Grievous are counterproductive with Vigor. Ideally, keeping to Earth Wall until you get a sense of things will be pretty good. For the 5th row, pretty much all options are good, and most of it will come down to you and how you want to tackle the content. Graceful Spirit reduces the cooldown of Spirit Walker's Grace by 1 minute, making you able to heal while moving more often. Usually this is good if you can take advantage of it, and more than that, if it's actually necessary for you to actually do it. Nature's Guardian is a simple lifesaver. When you dip too low in HP, this will proc and heal you for 20% of your max HP with a 45-second internal cooldown. This is essentially a set and forget if you don't need the utility of the other options. Lastly, Wind Rush Totem is a great raid option to boost people through phases. Works well on Rathian, Skitra, really any boss where a large number of people need to get from point A to point B. Moving down the list, Cloud Burst Totem is the best scaling option here and the totem we mentioned earlier that's converted from Healing Stream Totem. It takes a while to master, but once you do, the output of it is crazy, especially if you time it with a boss phase or a dungeon affix that will start damaging your group heavily. Alternatively, Flash Flood is easier to use, making your casts faster, which is if you consume tidal waves properly, of course. And this is a bit more mana intensive and as such works better in dungeons where mana isn't a big deal and fast casts are almost mandatory. Lastly, we have High Tide on the last row, usually the default choice here. Spending mana will proc this buff, making your chain heals a powerhouse and a staple of your AoE throughput, pretty much mandatory in raids. Buffing this with Unleash Life and even Flash Flood will make you cast super quick, super beefy chain heals that could be considered healing cooldowns on their own. They aren't, but they sure feel like it. The alternative, usually better in Mythic Plus than raids, is Ascendant. This is essentially a burst healing cooldown with a built-in initial AoE heal that splits its number the more people are within 20 yards of you. As such, it can be amazing in small groups when everyone is low and essentially boost your single target healing by, just increasing your throughput overall. We recommend High Tide still, since in the long run, if played right, will be more beneficial. When it comes to what stats are the best, Resto Shaman relies heavily on raw healing throughput, and as such, prefers intellect above all else, meaning eye level, but not exclusively. As a stat in a vacuum, intellect is not really the best, but higher intellect means higher eye level, meaning a larger quantity of stats overall. Crit is next, followed by versatility with haste and mastery at the bottom. Haste is a dangerous stat since it will deplete your mana pretty quickly due to the nature of your spec, but in dungeons, however, pace will become better since you want faster heals for the higher amount of damage taken per person per second. It's not always straightforward what to go for, and making big stat swaps can essentially change how your spec performs, and that falls on you to do or not. Keep to eye level for now. When getting enchants, gems, and other consumables, you can stick to a balanced stat ratio or even skew in favor of a particular one if you have the corruption that increases the gains of stat X from all sources. For the purpose of the video, we will keep the recommendations crit-centric, but you can very well replace them with versatility if you are pushing high keys and mythic raid and you want to reduce the amount of damage you are potentially taking, among the other benefits versatility brings. A Chord of Critical Strike will be your ring enchant, while also having the Deadly Lava Lazuli gem for your socket needs, although having one Leviathan's Eye of Intellect should be a priority. The weapon can have the Machinist's Brilliance enchant for the intellect proc and also the secondary stat proc. You can test the other options, but we recommend this one. The flask will be the Greater Flask of Endless Fathoms, and the Superior Battle Potion of Intellect will be your potion of choice for healing. Although you should always have a reserve of replenishment potions if you see yourself running out of mana often. For food, feasts are a no-brainer, but you can also always swap for the McDowell's Big Mac crit food. It's good. It's not that healthy though. Projecting? Nah. The much-loved Azurite system gives you a few options. Most are just good. Spouting Spirits though is probably the most impactful one. The extra range for Link is great, and the added healing is also good enough that you can stack this as much as you can. One of these is kind of mandatory, 2 of them will provide decent healing, and 3 has the potential to overheal, so play around with them and see how they perform. Some raid pieces come with this and with Heart of Darkness on the other row, which coincidentally is your potential second best trait, if at least considering how easy it is to get the 2, and the fact that the last 2 bosses of the raid drop this at a higher eye level makes them all the more worthwhile. Stacking this gives you a boost to all your stats provided you have the corruption to enable it. Other good traits to have are Overflowing Shores, increasing the range of Healing Rain and adding a small instant heal to it. Turn the Tide is a good trait for Mythic Plus, since in raids you sometimes want to ignore tidal waves and just spam chain heals, but in dungeons it boosts your single target healing that you're capable of, and as such could be worth stacking more in Mythic Plus, since if that is your priority content to do. Igneous Potential is the big DPS trait you want to have and stack if doing single target damage is a focus for you. Doing damage requires some awareness and knowledge of the fight, so although it's part of your gameplay, we recommend mastering the healing bits first. Pure stat traits are also really good, where they are just adding raw healing power with no real drawback or change to your playstyle, as opposed to the ones we discussed which focus on a specific healing spell to improve. If you want an alternative way to sim the potential throughput of your healer, questionablyepic.com is an amazing website made by the healing community that can help you choose trinkets and traits based on raw healing numbers if that is your goal. There are two main builds for Resto Shaman, one for raiding and one for dungeons, and you can make small changes to them based on your preferences and gear. In raid, you want Vision of Perfection Major as one of the potential best options in terms of raw numbers. This procs short duration healing tide totems that heal your entire raid for trickles. The proc rate has increased in 8.3, and the overall healing you get is very efficient considering in raids people won't be full HP for very long periods of time, and this costs no mana to maintain. Raids usually favor small consistent trickles of heals since there is always at least one boss mechanic that damages everyone in the raid in some fashion. It has an RNG component to it though, and that can off-put some of you and you cannot really control it, and if you're not fine with that, Memory of Lucid Dreams is an amazing alternative, especially if you're progressing through the raid. Pop this on intense healing phases, replacing overall sustained throughput from Vision with on-demand burst healing potential that won't burn all your mana right away. The minors can be Conflict and Strife since the versatility buff is pretty big and has almost 100% uptime. Formless Void is also similar. It procs with an intellect buff every time someone uses an essence. The uptime of the course of a fight is crazy high. I've noticed for me it passed 80% on pretty much all fights I've tested it on, and you already know how good intellect is. Ever Rising Tide can help with mana issues and has an intellect proc built in, and you can also opt for Unwavering Ward, which is a passive absorb that gets applied to your raid, and that amounts to decent healing over the course of an entire fight, and it's really just passive, you don't really need to do anything. In dungeons, one of the best majors is Vitality Conduit. This can end up in a lot of single target healing where your major weakness is and can save people in pretty dire situations. Spirit of Preservation also fulfills a similar role and can be an alternative, and depending on which one of these you have, you should get the other as a minor. The other minors can be Conflict and Strife and Ever Rising Tide for the same arguments as before: high uptime on versatility and intellect and mana return procs. There is currently an awesome trinket every healer that's not a Holy Paladin wants. Maybe even Holy Paladin? The Obsidian Claw from Moth has an amazing damage proc, but more importantly, a mana return proc every 2 minutes, giving you around 11% mana back, which is pretty good actually. The Alchemist Stone is a good second choice, as it always is for healers. Conch of Dark Whispers is a good crit source, while Humming Black Dragon Scale is an easy haste trinket to get if you plan on just focusing on Mythic Plus and don't really want to do the whole raid. The raid has two corrupted weapons you can use. Vor's Yokal is the mediocre version, although still pretty good with the Void Ritual effect because, well, stats are again strong. But the actual Biss is Marcoa, and that's because of Flash of Insight is actually the best corruption for Resto Shaman and probably all healers. Except Holy Paladin? What the fuck's up with that spec? And speaking of corruption effects, we all know the big contenders, which don't work as great for Resto Shaman. What really works great are stack corruptions, more specifically Severe and Versatile as good examples. They scale with the amount of secondary stat you have, respective to each corruption effect. Other than this, any other stack corruption, save probably haste and raids, for the reasons we mentioned before, can be really good. In keeping with a priority system, you always want Riptide to always be cast on someone. Keep Healing Rain on cooldown, use Unleash Life on cooldown to buff Chain Heal ideally, cast Healing Stream or Cloud Burst Totem when group needs AoE healing, use Earth Wall when your group is taking consistent damage. Healers are most of the time a reactive class, although you do prepare for incoming shit by having Cloud Burst ready and filled with healing. You shouldn't stick with this rotation no matter what, since each spell has a purpose and you don't want to overheal almost never. Depending on your playstyle, your gear, and how the encounter plays out, you can find yourself casting more chain heals and capping on tidal waves, which isn't necessarily ideal or straightforward. In dungeons, you want a bit more burst healing since mana isn't as big of an issue and the pacing of the combat is faster than in raid. Consuming tidal waves should be ideal. Cast Riptides and Chain Heals depending on what your group needs. Then consume tidal waves with Healing Wave if things are chill, or Healing Surge if shit hit the fan. Healing Wave is cheap and mana efficient but has a long cast time, while Healing Surge heals for more, casts faster, but might end up depleting your mana in the long run, especially on tyrannical keys. You need to know the fight ideally and try to be as efficient as you can, but also able to respond when people fuck up, even if that's you. So you can, do emergency damage control. There's a lot more going around Resto Shaman than we can cover in a video, especially since we focus more on basics. You can check the Earth Shrine and Ancestral Guidance Discord for more advanced info, where you can even talk with the top tier Resto Shamans, some of which helped us with the guide. Sexy and Twisp in particular provided us with the feedback we needed. Sexy is also the author of the Icy Veins guide, which goes into more details regarding the spec, and Twisp is a Resto Shaman admin who does some amazing work in both Discord channels, which you should definitely browse for more in-depth goodness. Links down below. And also down below you'll find different links as well. And with this being said, we want to give a special thanks to our patrons for supporting us time and time again every time we make a video every month. We love you guys and we really appreciate your support. And if you want to support us a little bit more, like I mentioned, the links down below will get you to our Patreon page and our merch page. It's actually really cool. You should check it out. Maybe you'll find something that you like. Thank you for watching the video and we'll catch you in the next one.